Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today is my 32nd birthday. That's right, 32 years on this earth, and I've spent a lot of them playing World of Tanks. And I want to mark it in a special way by giving all of you a review on the current best vehicle in the game. That's right, it's the Tier 10 Soviet heavy tank, the Object 279E. Love it or hate it, there's got to be a couple of reasons at least why this vehicle is just so darn dominant at the moment. Firstly, because it's the third reward for the second season of personal missions. So, in theory, only the better players are going to be getting it. However, I don't think it's just because the best players are playing this tank. I think the vehicle also has a few other awesome aspects of the vehicle that I'm going to be showing you in the statistics. And for those of you out there who absolutely loathe this tank and hate feeling useless against them on the battlefield, well, I'm not going to be able to tell you instantly how to beat the broken, but maybe I can give you a few tips and tricks along the way. So let's compare the Object 279E to a variety of other Tier 10 Soviet heavy tanks, namely the IS-4, because that's probably the most comparable tank inside the tech tree to this vehicle. The Object 260, again, it's a very similar tank, and it's equally a final reward from one of the seasons of personal missions. And the Object 277, which I think just edges the IS-7 for being the best all-round tech tree available Tier 10 Soviet heavy tank. So immediately we notice the Object 279E has the highest damage per minute in this comparison with the best rate of fire, firing 0.71 rounds a minute, more than the IS-4 for example, and that's because this vehicle was planned to have an autoloader. Not in game, in real life. And thank goodness Wargaming didn't give his thing an autoloader or an auto-reloader, because it's bad enough as it is without having what it was designed or developed to have in real life. So the Object 279E doesn't have the highest alpha damage in this comparison. Its 122mm main armament deals 440 damage with each shot. The Object 277, like the IS-7, has a 130mm main armament that deals 490 damage with each shot. In addition to this, we see that the vehicle doesn't have the highest penetration, 258, the same as the IS-4. This can hold it back for a free-to-play player compared to the Object 277, but let's be honest, if you've got this vehicle, you're probably going to be a very dedicated tanker, have a variety of premium tanks as well, and you're going to be probably loading heat. And if we load heat in this tank, then everything gets balanced out to exactly the same amount of penetration. However, one thing I'd like to highlight about this tank is that its standard rounds are AP, and so when we compare it to, for example, the IS-4 and the 260, it's the same as the IS-4, but it doesn't have that lovely APCR shell velocity that you have on the Object 260, which makes it quite tricky or harder to snipe at long-range tanks. So this vehicle can carry 40 rounds of ammunition, 10 rounds more than the IS-4. The IS-4 doesn't really have enough ammo to be able to take a variety of types. If you take too many AP, then you feel that when you get against all Tier 10 tanks that you don't have enough heat. When you take too much heat, then you feel that you're wasting it when you get into those lovely Tier 8 matchups. And God forbid when you get into a hold-down war in the IS-4 and you want to be spamming high explosive rounds. It just doesn't quite have enough of an ammo loadout, something that they've even fixed on the 260, but the IS-4 seems to be forgotten about. Whether the IS-4 is going to be replaced by one of the new double-barrel tanks remains to be seen, and maybe that's why Wargaming haven't addressed the tank in a while. Anyway, moving on. Object 279E gun handling, 2.3 seconds aim time is phenomenal, and it's better than the IS-4 and the Object 277, but worse than the Object 260. Its dispersion on the move is right in the middle, much better than the IS-4, but worse than the 260 and the Object 277. Its turret traverse, however, is best in class at 0.06, and so this means that if you're not moving the tank and you're only turning the turret, the aim time on this tank is actually really nice indeed. Combine this with 0.36 accuracy, which is better than the IS-4 and the Object 277. It's only just a little bit worse than the Object 260. And I think you're starting to get the picture of this tank. Not only does it have the highest damage per minute, its gun handling is not that much behind, if not better, than other vehicles in this comparison. The only thing that kind of sucks about the vehicle is that its gun depression is 5 degrees, which is 1 degree less than the IS-4 and the 260 and half a degree worse than the 277. But you can kind of make up for it by just exposing your armor to a point where they miss you and then expose your entire tank maybe over a ridgeline against your opponents. Alright, so now on to mobility. 40 kilometers an hour, I mean it's the slowest tank in this comparison. And yeah, this tank definitely doesn't feel like it's the fastest of heavy tanks. But 40 is not 35 like on a Super Conqueror. 40 is not even 30 like you have on an E100 or 20 as you have on a mouse. And for a very heavily armored tank, it does feel like it's got quite a lot of mobility to its name. One thing that's a little lackluster about the vehicle is the reverse speed at 13 kilometers an hour, significantly worse than the 260 in the Object 277, but I guess you just want to be that rock and not have to retreat in the Object 279E. The power to weight ratio is just over 14, better than the IS-4, but worse than the other two tanks in this comparison. And so that means that this thing better have some armor, because it's looking like its mobility is much, much worse than the two other tanks that I'd say are competitive in this matchup, the 260 and the 277. I've only really got the IS-4 in here to show you just how much better this tank is than its most comparable tech tree tank. It's almost just laughable how that works out. One thing I should mention about this tank, though, is its tank traverse is actually pretty good at 30 degrees. And when you combine this with okay ground resistances, it actually has a better traverse speed than the 260 and a significantly better traverse speed than the IS-4. So this allows it to get its armor facing the correct direction quickly with an improved traverse speed over other super heavy tanks. And it's definitely something that this tank feels as if it's halfway between an E100 and one of the more mobile heavies like a 5A, although, as we're going to see with the armor, in many places, the 279E is just flat out better than something like an E100. Alright, so the 279E, this is going to be one of the most complicated parts of the analysis. Its frontal hull armor is 185, its side hull armor is 120, with its rear being 90. Its turret armor is 330, 140, and 90. But if we take a look at the armor model of the tank, we will actually see that the plates on the front are very segregated. You see how it's like a gradient going from 185 to 170 to 160 to 150 to 140. Wargaming have clearly spent a long time on the model of this vehicle, and it probably takes quite a lot of resources up compared to other tanks because of it. So this means that the Object 279E doesn't have any flat plate. It's very, very curved on the front of the tank. So when you're aiming at it, it makes it very tricky to be able to penetrate. This is how an Object 279E penetrates an Object 279E frontally. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. You're best to actually fire just right on the upper part of the hull armor, and if you can fire premium rounds with 340 penetration, then you can see this is actually your best chance to penetrate the tank. Bit of a weird one, right? Just shooting straight at the upper hull is the best way to pen this thing frontally. Now, if the Object 279E angles its armor, then that means that the side plate, which, look at this, it's like a boat down the side of the hull. It's very well angled, which means that you can over-angle the Object 279E and ricochet many rounds. But if it does this against you, and it's trying to bait you into shooting its side armor or to glance off the outside of its frontal armor, what you want to do is to shoot the inside hull, as if you were shooting at an IS-7, or shooting at the cheeks, I should say, of an IS-4, for example. So this means that if you're firing standard rounds, you've probably got like a 1 in 2 chance of going through the 279E's armor like this. If you're in a lower tier tank and you're not in tier 10 or a tier 9 with a meaty alpha penetration, then you're best to load gold. And if you load gold and you've got 340 millimeters of pen, then you're pretty much able to auto-aim at the side of this vehicle, and you're going to be going through it way more times out of 10 than you're not. But just look at the side armor on this tank. And so this means the Object 279E, when it comes around a corner, because of its curved outer side, can actually not side scrape. As long as you're not getting shot by high explosive rounds. The fact that this tank doesn't have a lower plate. Now, I'm not even kidding. It's got 4 tracks, 2 sets of 2 tracks, no lower plate. And so this means that the 279E can come around a corner like this. Imagine that my calculator is the wall. You literally just come around the corner exposing the whole of the front of your vehicle, and then more often than not they're going to ricochet off your outer hull, or they're just going to try and shoot around into what they think would be a lower plate, and it's going to get absorbed, and unless they hit right on the beak here and they still have to go through 300 millimeters of armor, you're just going to be able to dominate them. One thing that you probably don't want to do in the Object 279E is to side scrape out around a corner like this, because if you do that, then you're exposing all of that weak plate on the inside. And if you expose that weak plate on the inside, even standard rounds are going to go through you sometimes. Or if you really mess up and you over-angle the vehicle, some heat rounds can go through the side of your armor, especially this upper bar here when it gets over-angled. The main strength of the 279E has to be a combination of the no lower plate with the upper hull armor. Imagine that you're driving up over a ridgeline and you can get your armor like this. The fact that you don't have a lower plate, which is usually angled down like this, which becomes a huge weak point, allows you to just expose so much of your tank. This is against 340 heat pen. You can't pen it. If it manages to get above you and you don't get really directly underneath this tank, it's going to be able to ricochet you again and again and again. And you can use this to your advantage in the 279E. If you have a mound of rubble in front of you, literally just drive up, expose what would be, you would think, your weak lower plate, and your opponents are likely to shoot up into it, ricochet off, and then you can bound over the mound to be able to take on your opponents, or just bound over and then pull back and do it all over again. So this means that really your only option against the 279E is to try and flank it. If you do that, then you're easily going to be able to pen it in the side of the turret or the side of the hull, or get behind it, and even some really large caliber high explosive rounds like on the Leopard, or not high caliber ones, but HESH rounds will be able to do even more damage to it from behind. Now, I'm not saying that the 279E's armor is not crazy. It definitely is. I'm just trying to give all of you the best possible way to be able to deal with these tanks. The cupola, when you're facing it on the right, is a little bit weak, but again, it's just such a hard thing to hit, and you're more often than not going to miss it completely and then leave yourself open to a tremendous amount of punishment at the hands of an impressive damage per minute. What a 279E driver wants to do to you, boys and girls, is to make you miss, and then it's going to shoot you twice if you're in a big tank, or it's going to just shoot you once with your 440 alpha damage if you're in a middle vehicle, and then pull back and try and do it to you again. Do everything that you can to avoid this from happening. So, as if the armor wasn't enough for this vehicle, 2,400 hit points is a big old slap. Better than the 260 by 300. That's a significant margin. Better than the 277 by 200, and only 100 behind what should be the Soviet Super Heavy in the form of the IS-4. Finally, the vehicle has 400 meters view range, which means that if you use coated optics on this tank, that you're going to be able to spot your opponents wherever they are. And if, like me, you can think of no better tank to be able to go and spend bonds on getting enhanced equipment on, because I'm probably going to be playing this thing in ranked next season, then you can get away without even using coated optics if you have an exceptionally skilled crew and you're willing to use a premium consumable. But you know what? I think that's quite enough jibber jabber about the Object 279E. How about I give you a double helping of overpowered gameplay? So here we go, we're rolling out on Ghost Town, also known as Lost City, and we're going to be attacking the enemy team. Now, attacking in this kind of a matchup is a bit awkward in a heavy tank because quite a lot of it relies on your team doing well on the flanks. Ghost Town is a funny old map because unless you win the north and you kind of win the south, it doesn't really matter how well you do in the town. Sure, if you win the town, then you can manage to shoot out towards the other flanks and sometimes break a stalemate. From this location, you can manage to shoot the southeast, and from this location you see here on the map, you can manage to shoot the northeast. And if you manage to do that, sure, you can influence the battle, but really a lot of it comes down to just how well your team spreads out and wins the flanks. And I'm quite happy with how my team is spread out here. Immediately we have aggressive pressure from our 1390 on the northern flank. We have a Centurion and a T69 setting up shop. But I have my eyes on one kind of prize, and do you see what that is? I've always wanted to go into this position from this side of the map. Let me tell you, this position doesn't work if you're a defender. But if you're an attacker, maybe we can make some magic happen. You can see my eyes glint to the right. I move my camera and I realize, oh, what's this? So this dip is horrible if you're defending. If you go into this dip when you're defending, you're just unable to do anything with it. But when you're attacking, you can see that Wargaming have clearly put walls to the left and to the right. And I'm not sure if they're destructible. So I'm gonna, later on, spoilers in this replay, test it out. So if you think I'm being an absolute muppet, well, you figure it out. I am an absolute muppet, but I'm a muppet for science. I'm a scientific muppet. So we managed to put a good round there into the back of the 430U. We set them on fire, and there's my testing. I think I just fired a heat round into a wall. Why didn't I test that with the high explosive rounds or AP rounds? Oh well, who cares? Now I know that the walls are not destructible and that they're going to give me some cover. And are we going to be able to sling a shell into the WZ-111-14? Well, yes we are. Remember what the base accuracy is of this tank. It's not too shabby, it is 0.36. And because of... Oh, that's not what you want to go in front of, but... magic armor, right, boys and girls? We just bounced 310 millimeters of penetration. A big old 1,150 alpha damage shell, and we just ricocheted off the front of our tank when we weren't even really angled, because probably he managed to hit our side of our tracks or something, or he just hit our upper hull and it bounced off, or maybe he hit our turret. This tank really does have magic armor. 1,150 damage block there. It doesn't like that 430 you liked what we did to him, was setting him on fire, as he's now coming around the corner and deciding to engage us. And just look how wonderful this position is, and this is what I was telling you earlier about. If you do this in the 279E, remember what happens with your armor. The whole of your lower plate is a bounce, the whole of your upper plate is a bounce, the whole of your turret is a bounce. This is just baiting your opponents into missing their shots and laughing at them. This is where the 279E is just ridiculously strong. And not that many people know how to play against it. They think, oh, surely I've got a shot up into a tank. That pens every tank, right? Not the 279E. And oh, here we go. Tweedledum is going to decide to try and approach us. No, he's joined by Tweedledee on the left as well. All right, the WZ-111-14 looks like he was thinking, do I really want to go into the dip with the most dangerous tank in the game? Thinks twice about it. We ricochet him, we're keeping our eyes on him, and we're just getting surrounded by enemy tanks right now. It's going to require something special to be able to get out of this one. Well, firstly, hopefully maybe a ricochet from the FV-215B183 will help. All right, so I tank a WZ-111-14. I ricochet the FV, and so now I know that I can focus my attention on the Tier 9 Chinese heavy tank. We put one shell into him, looks like we locked down his tracks, and this is where the damage per minute of the vehicle comes into play, and we put one right up into his lower plate, something that he couldn't really do to us, and we shut him down. And now the FV looks like he's a little bit more vulnerable. He doesn't have loads of people looking after him, and oh wait, well, maybe he does. Okay, well, that's how we play World of Tanks around here. All right, it looks like Tweedledee was joined by Tweedledum. All right, bud. Two Tier 9 and Tier 10 Chinese and Soviet derpy forward aggressive tanks just managed to try and put the pressure up on me, and you just don't really put the pressure up on this tank, or at least if you do, you all do it together, not one by one. Remember, this tank has 2,500 damage per minute. It's got more than enough to be able to blitz its way through its opponents. And I realize the FV-215B183 has just fired and killed the Object 140. I know the T-54 Mod 1 is going to think that I'm shooting the FV-215B, but in fact, I managed to get a shot into him, and I should still have enough of a reload to be able to shoot this FV-215B183. But I don't want to risk it. I don't want to get shot in the side by the mouse, possibly even by the 430 or the Standard B. And I'm hoping my artillery can manage to finish this guy off, because he is sitting completely out in the open. But it also looks like I just don't have time for waiting around, and so I'm going to lock down the guy's tracks. And this is why I keep a nice salvo of high explosive rounds. Remember, this is something you can do in this tank that you can't do in the IS-4. In the IS-4, you will definitely run out of ammunition inside most of your matchups if you try and do this in your very close games. However, I take a big amount of high explosive rounds, and so by shooting an AP round into the FV's tracks, or his heat, whatever, like an AP or a heat round, locking him in place, and then load high explosive rounds, we can just get him, and he can't get us. And so that's why the high explosive rounds on this tank are delicious. But they're also really good for shooting at very lightly armored tanks as well. Talking about lightly armored tanks, there's a 432, gets shut down by our artillery, and I turn my attention to the Standard B, unable to get him though, so we put one round into the Object 704, but it looks like, because I was firing heat, we don't actually manage to take the tracks off, or maybe we just missed a little bit there. He luckily fluffs a shot into us, and we put a follow-up shell, and we can see there's a 416 planning, but I see there's a lovely ridgeline that's going to be covering most of my armor, so I should be okay, and I'm going to instead turn my attention to try and find where the mouse is. We don't find the mouse. I look for the Standard B. The Stritzfang S1 tracks me in place, but doesn't deal any damage to me, and it's the 416 behind that deals the damage. I turn my attention to the 704. I'm trying to micromanage getting engaged from multiple directions, and that's what you have to do in this tank. I'm now loading AP rounds because I cheap out, and I thought I was going to shoot the 704 again. Huge mistake, the biggest mistake of the game, boys and girls. I didn't load the gold. I didn't spend the extra credits, so I bounced the standard round, and we don't kill the mouse. Oh, I push around the corner, and I lose 359 hit points, and I decide to blind fire against the S1. That was an absolute disaster. Not only did we not kill the only remaining tier 10 tank on the enemy team, but we took a subsequent 359 damage from a TD at the back. I'm hoping this mouse decides to make an aggressive play here so I can finish him off with our heat round, but it just doesn't look like it's going to be the case. Alright, so this game's neck and neck. We've got 3 minutes left. We're down by 3 tanks. It's 3 tanks and 2 self-propelled guns by what looks like 6 tanks and 2 self-propelled guns. Well, make that 3 tanks and 1 self-propelled gun, and it doesn't look like that FV-3805 at the far west of the map is going to be long left for this world. Alright, so I'm trying to create a plan. I'm asking the Leopard prototype to help me go and try and attack out south. The mouse isn't going anywhere, but if we want to win this game, we have 2 options. One is we cap, one is we kill all of the enemy tanks. They're not going to have to come to us. Remember, they're defending, they're not attacking, so all they have to do is survive. I know where the mouse is. I know I can track down the mouse towards the latter part of the game, but I definitely can't depend on tracking down the Scorpion G and the Centurion 5-1 and the T-49. So that's why I'm asking the Leopard prototype to go and attack this flank. I need to kill all the fast tanks so then I can kill the heavier, slower tanks towards the end of the battle. But even still, there's that pesky S1 that we're going to have to dig out as well. So I get spotted, probably by the Centurion 5-1 who's above me, and the Scorpion G puts a big old round into my Leopard prototype. So he's now down to 68 hit points. Luckily, I finished off the Centurion 5-1, even though I wasn't fully aimed, and I put the pedal to the metal, and I'm going to see if we can try and get behind this Scorpion G. But unfortunately, the artillery on the enemy team shuts down the Leopard prototype, so the Scorpion G is probably going to advance forwards now to see if he can get a shot into my side. And it's me and a Skoda T50 versus, gosh, still 5 tanks and 2 self-propelled guns on the enemy team. I'm sitting at 7,000 damage, and now I'm in a 1 versus 7 with 2 minutes left. I'm not going to be able to take down all of these tanks unless some absolute miracle happens. But what this replay is to show you just the capacity of this tank. You can bounce the most dangerous tank destroyers in the game, as long as they're not firing Hesh. You can manage to use your DPM to just out-blitz your opponents. Your mobility isn't horrific, so you get countered and cornered. You can actually make aggressive plays at 40 kilometers an hour to be able to outflank the T-49 when he came looking for you. This is what the vehicle is all about. Scorpion G behind me bounces off my side armor. I thought he was going to be there, but unfortunately, the mouse comes round. I stopped to try and shoot him. I tried to get a shot into his lower plate, unable to find it. I feel I've got to get myself out of harm's way before somebody manages to come up after me. I see the mouse isn't angling. I think I can get back around the corner, and he actually manages to fire a high explosive round at my tank. Well done, Mr. Mouse. You got your revenge on me, and I thoroughly regret not paying to win to penetrate that tier 10 German super heavy's turret. You can see the ricochet mark off the left of the turret right there, staring me in the face even now. Just knowing that I cheaped out, so I didn't kill this guy earlier, and so it came back definitely to haunt me here. Would I have been able to win the battle if that wasn't the case? Well, this mouse got 1 kill. We'll have to see if he had a big impact in the post-game stats. Alright, so round 2 for the Object 279E, and this time we're defending against an assault. And this is a game that you will have never seen because it was one of the rare occurrences that I was playing off stream. When I play off stream, it's a hell of a lot easier. There's definitely nobody stream sniping me when I play off stream. And also I get to fully focus on the gameplay, and I'm not trying to focus on entertain at the same time, which makes it a slight bit easier, right? So I learned from the last game not to be a little bit cheap. And you can see now I'm actually taking more heat rounds inside this tank, and I'm going to be firing them a lot more willy-nilly. If you're going to be offended by this, fine. I accept that. This tank is not about balance. Playing this tank is not about fairness. Playing this tank is the fact that you were able to complete those missions, and Wargaming, for some bizarre reason, and I completely disagree with, decided to reward you with frankly the best tank in the game. I'm not going to be playing it by half measure. And trust me, when you're trying to hunt ace tankers with a vehicle like this, or if you're trying to just get exceptional experience scores or marks of excellence, or even just try and compete if you care about things like WN8, you're in for a very hard time. What is expected of you in the Object 279E is nothing short of domination, and anything less. You really feel as if you are not an underdog, you are the favorite by a long shot. And that can actually set you up for some painful games when you feel that through no fault of your own, or even through fault of your own, that you haven't been able to achieve what you set out to, or what was expected of you in such a powerhouse of a tank. So, is this mouse going to be the bane of me? Well, one thing that's very interesting there is it looked to me like we actually penetrated his tank, but we didn't actually penetrate his tank. Oh well, let's not worry about that. Let's focus on the mouse now, and that is shooting the cheeks rather than lower plate round the corner. The Emil 1951 is backing him up, stopping me from going toe-to-toe and fighting all in against a mouse. But fighting all in against a mouse is not really going to be your most sensible option in a tank like this. What you want to do is to force him into awkward positions. You want to force him into angling his armor badly. And then you want to dab the 2 key and pay 5,000 credits a shot and just butter his German armor. You can see he was firing premium rounds right from the get-go. This guy never fired a standard round at me, not even since the beginning. And we're not doing the same to him. But there's a big difference between when you fire premium rounds at an Object 279E and premium rounds at a mouse. And that is that the mouse will never really be able to bounce your premium rounds, but the 279E will sometimes. So this Emil 1951 thought he was going to make a hero play. I'm not interested in any heroes around here, buddy. I think he's got 1 more shot left. I'm going to reverse my way around the corner. If I tank the mouse, I tank the mouse, so be it. And he decides to just eat the shell. So the mouse actually penetrates me 2 additional times. He's done 1,500 damage to me. Good job, Mr. Mouse, but I guess you didn't expect me to be able to win this duel, even when you had a little tier 8 minion to try and distract me. So the T110E5 on the enemy team has decided to push aggressively across the bridge, I guess, to come and try and help the mouse out. He fires a round into our tracks. That's not my lower plate, mate. This tank doesn't have a lower plate. And so we finish him off as well. And I guess the sense of urgency in that T110E5, thinking, oh wow, that mouse is falling. If I want to be able to win this game, I'm going to have to do something rather quickly. But it just doesn't seem to work because this tank has such crazy DPM. This is the kind of DPM that used to be only on your better medium tanks. This is the kind of DPM that was on your more derpy tank destroyers. Now, there are some of the most heavily armored tanks in the game, like this one, that also have incredible 2,500 plus base DPM. And when Wargaming put in bond equipment, when Wargaming allow you to have super crew training these days, with crews with 0 skill brothers in arms, Santa Claus with 2 skills that are brothers in arms for free and an additional skill, so you could easily get him up to 7 skills or even 8 skills. I think my French Santa Claus is about to hit 8 skills inside World of Tanks. When you combine this with enhanced equipment and premium consumables, and your crews are so good that you no longer need to take a fire extinguisher, you can use that slot to be able to take something else on the tank to be able to amplify its statistics even more. Things just start to get absolutely crazy. Think like a tortoise maximizing its DPM, but a tortoise that is maximizing its DPM but also has a turret and kind of has a lot of mobility as well and doesn't really have a weak point frontally apart from a tiny little cupola on top and no lower plate. Not that really the lower plate is the weak point on the tortoise. You'd have to be a muppet to want to shoot that. But this tank, it's just too good at everything. It's not the super slow, super heavy that it is. It's actually quite nimble. You can turn. You can stop people from getting your sides. You can manage to outmaneuver even slower tanks or even just surprise mediums and light tanks with some of your mobility. You can combine that with just the impenetrable armor that even against premium rounds still works. And these days, everybody is slinging gold left, right and center, be they heat rounds or be they just premium APCR rounds or even just HESH rounds. Now this vehicle doesn't take high explosive or HESH in an incredible fashion, but just to be able to have that armor that sometimes works against gold, unlike thick German armor would, just makes this tank transcend the heavy status. Think about the 60TP. The 60TP is really the E100 for a new age. The 60TP's armor will work against heat just as well as it will work against AP. And it's kind of similar for a vehicle like this. You're either going to pen it because it was over-angling, or you're not going to pen it because its armor is just outrageously efficient. And so everything about this tank just amalgamates into this tour de force powerhouse in the game. And it's win ratio that this vehicle is achieving. Over 60% average win ratio. So for every person who gets 50% wins, there's somebody who's getting 70% wins at tier 10. It's not just because the better players are playing it. It's a lot down to the fact that the statistics of the vehicle are just absolutely wild. Now we actually get penned twice by the Leopard at the end of this game, and I'd like to highlight why that is. If you're going down a slope like this in the 279E, that actually means that you're angling your armor downwards, and so the Leopard in this position gets to shoot down on my upper plate with premium rounds, and they're easily going to pen. Remember, 279E from above, terrible. 279E when your opponents are below you, it's kind of reverse science here. It doesn't quite make sense, but because of the way that the lack of the lower plate, this is the armor strong. This is the armor weak. This is the armor as well from the side. Weak plate here, strong plate here. It doesn't quite make sense with this tank, and it's something that you have to learn. I guess I could have played safer at the end of the game here against the Leopard, but really, as we're going to see in the post-game stats, it didn't really matter. So the first round you saw on Ghost Town was a second class medal, and that was for a 1,200 base experience game. We got a high caliber for the 7,400 damage that we dealt. We killed half of the enemy team. But of course, as I am filthy playing this vehicle, we barely broke even on credits, even with a premium account. In the second round on Erlenberg, this was my first ace tanker for the Object 279E. It required over 1,400 base experience, which is a phenomenal result for a tier 10 tank. We dealt 7,500 damage in less than 6.5 minutes, and we did 2,500 spotting as well against pretty much a lot of the Leopard at the end of the game. Look at that, yeah, 1,467. That's why we played aggressively there. That's why we were reckless. Sure, the Leopard killed us, but I think that that was the part of the game where it propelled me over the cusp of reaching my first ace tanker on this vehicle, but we lost credits, even with a premium account. This tank is filthy, but do you even really care if you lose 12,000 credits? Probably not. You're crew training like an absolute boss in this tank. So much so that when you combine this with Wargaming's 10,000 experience events, I've been getting 25,000 experience in some of my games, and they haven't even been ace tankers. It really is a complete luxury to have a reward vehicle at tier 10. You will amplify your crew progress so much while not being the underdog sometimes in your tier 8 tanks. There's something quite reassuring about playing tier 10 in World of Tanks. The fact that you're always just as good as your opposing tank. And I guess that's something that I can only really say in the best tier 10 tank, right? The only thing that comes close to this has to be the Donkerer, aka the pseudo chieftain. It's not a real chieftain. What is it called? The FE4201 or something. That's really the only competition that this tank has for its crown. Apart from that, it's this insane mix of damage per minute, true powerhouse armor with an armor layout that confuses the hell out of your opponents, and enough mobility to avoid it just waddling around sometimes in a very frustrating fashion like you would in a mouse or even some of the other super heavy Soviet tanks. So the Object 279E, is it absolutely incredible? Yes it is. I've been able to get a better win ratio, better average experience, better average damage in this tank than I have in any other heavy tank in the game. It took me several months of consistent effort, probably playing for maybe 10 to 20 hours a week, to be able to unlock the 279E. And while the missions are undoubtedly way easier now than when I did them, it's still not going to be achievable apart from the very top percentages of the World of Tanks player base. And so it really does baffle me as to why Wargaming would have made the statistics of the Object 279E as strong as they are. As I said in a previous video, why would you give one of, if not the best tanks in the game to only the best players, where the rest of the community aren't going to be able to play it, they aren't going to be able to figure it out, they aren't going to learn how to counter it, which is one of the things that I really wanted to highlight in this video. Nevertheless, it's undeniable that if you can manage to get your hands on one of these tanks, that until Wargaming, and I would love them to do this, remove the ability to play non-tech tree tanks inside the ranked battles game mode, why you would play anything else? Just play something like this, or play something like a Donker inside the ranked battles. You're literally putting yourself at a disadvantage if you don't. I presumed that tier 10 solo queue or ranked battle specifically was going to be the ultimate way for a solo player to be able to test themselves. But in ranked battles, unless you're willing to put the effort or you have the skill to be able to unlock a tank like this, you're going to have to compete against this tank. You're going to have to compete against the Donkerer. It's not even fair that you should have to play against those kind of vehicles. So the Object 279E, I think it's the best tank in the game. That's all there is to say. That's my review of the vehicle. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that's it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. If you did, give it a thumbs up, or maybe it was just useful to you that I tried to highlight as much as possible how to take these things out on the battlefield. If you didn't like it or you didn't think it was useful, give it a thumbs down and let me know what you think about the tank in the comments down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.